Hello and welcome to a look at Druid for the Commodore 64, a game that was released by Firebird. The plot of this game is that everything was perfectly happy, fine and dandy, all that good stuff in the world of Belorn, but of course there wouldn't be much of a game if it stayed that way. So some demonic princess has been summoned through an interdimensional portal and now have decided to take residence in the evil Lich's dungeon, Lich called a Commander, a Mentor. Oh, where's the difficult special when they are? But whatever. You, being a druid, of course, which is a guardian of balance of all things, has been tasked to go out and get rid of these demonic princes, because we can't have that nonsense going on in our otherwise perfect world. So off you go, looking for treasures, locate in the dungeon and try to navigate the dungeon and then kill the demonic princes and eventually close the portal. If you go over the interface, you can check the top left side. We have something called Druid, and a bar to the right of that, and that is indeed your health bar. Underneath that you have your golem's health bar, because we haven't got a golem at the moment, we have no health bar showing for it. But the golem will need special mention later. Further to the right you have the indicators of your three spell types. You have water magic, fire magic, and the sappy electricity magic. You can cycle through those three, and as you can possibly imagine, the different enemies will have vulnerabilities to one spell, being useful to another, and be resistant to a third of them. So any enemy that is vulnerable to a specific elemental type will only take one hit. An enemy that is neutral to a certain type will take 2 hits, and an enemy that is resistant to a certain type will take 3 hits of that elemental type in order to destroy them. So of course you can imagine that learning which of the elements the different enemies are vulnerable to is part of the gameplay. And of course, because you have limited resources available to you, you ideally want to use the best spell against the different minions as you navigate the map. To the right of the spells you have any keys you may have, and for reference you'll need keys. Then you have an invisibility spell which will make you invisible and will make the enemies ignore you, but it doesn't make you invulnerable. There's a difference between invisible and invulnerable. To the right of that you have the golem, if you have a golem spell, so you can summon a golem. And the skull marker is chaos magic. Chaos magic is the only magic that can destroy the demonic princes once you bump into them in the dungeon, and it has to be delivered at the point blank range. Always lovely. Of course, underneath all that stuff you have your rating, and that goes up as you progress through the game, and as you can possibly imagine, the further you get into the game, the higher a rating you will gain. This pentagram thing, by the way, is a life restore thing that will restore your health, which is always good. Those are the only ways you can restore your health, for reference. Concerning the rating, expect to see half wit for quite a few times when you play a game. Let's do technical stuff and then spend the rest of the time talking about the general gameplay of the game. Graphically, considering the age of this game, I actually think it doesn't look super awesome, spectacular, but it definitely doesn't look bad either. I would argue that the Druid looks perhaps a bit more like a wizard, but it works. You can see some sort of cast in a rope, and the different spell effects are not particularly super exciting, but they serve their purpose and they do what they need to do. Some of the enemies look funky and some of them look a bit bleh. The beetles, I think, look very, very basic, but Overall, on the graphical side, considering the scope of this game, I think all around the graphics look fine. And by the way, here's the revelation that we need a key because the first door in the dungeon is locked. Lovely. The sound design wise, the sound effects are what they need to be. I do wish that the enemies draining your health by being close to you was somewhat a louder sound effect, but it's the basic explodey thingy thing when you open doors and other equivalent sound effects. They don't stand out, they don't surprise you, but they are perfectly acceptable. The title tune is nice and thematically appropriate for a game of this type, and it is one of those tunes that if you've heard it before by playing this game, you will instantly think Druid if you hear it elsewhere, and I suppose that is the hallmark of a good tune or piece of music, whatever you decide to call it. The controls are what you would expect them to be. Up, down, left, right will move the Druid in a set or mentioned direction, and the fire button will fire off whatever element you have currently selected. The different spells has to be selected by using different keys on the keyboard, and yes, even the key is actually a spell. And it can be a bit wonky when you are surrounded by enemies to have to reach over and hit various different keys on the keyboard, but it works. It's not elegant, but it works. It does what it needs to do. Now, gameplay-wise, certain people have called Druid a single-player Gauntlet, which I think is a bit of a simplification, and it is also in part inaccurate. Druid requires an awful lot more exploration than Gauntlet ever did, because in Gauntlet you technically just have to go for the exit and that's about it, whereas in this game you will need to know the locations of the different chests and know which treasures are in the different chests and absolutely make sure you pick up the appropriate bonus from that chest in any given situation, because sometimes you will need extra keys and sometimes you will need the chaos magic, which of course is the only magic that can destroy the demon princes if you bump into them. As I was saying earlier, the golem needs special mention, because when you summon the golem, if you are by your lonesome, you can give it basic commands like wait, follow, and send. Sends it in whatever direction you're currently facing. And that is very, very useful to be able to give it orders, because it's very good at blocking your progress. But if you have a friend available, they can actually take control of the golem using a joystick, which makes it infinitely more useful. Druid is a surprisingly good game, and if you have the patience for it, it can be very, very rewarding, and with a bit of effort, it is entirely possible to complete. On that note, thanks for watching, take care, see you next time, bye bye for now.